UConn women gear up this week, had a send-off at Stores as they jump into their 31st consecutive Sweet 16. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. No matter where I've been, Stores, Hartford, Raleigh, Greensboro, any place that I've ever watched UConn or covered them this year, people have come up to me and said they really appreciate us and the show and everyone that makes it go. So we thank you. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so now, because we're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering both the women's and men's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you the coverage because you absolutely deserve it. Okay. Let's bring into the program my co-host on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Bella Tamano, of Hoops Capital of the World, and of course, a student at UConn and a journalism major doing all kinds of good stuff for Locked On UConn and, of course, for the Substack. So the women got a send-off today. You were there. You sent me some video, some really cool stuff. You also were going to Spokane as well, right?
Yes, I am.
Cool. What was the mood? It seemed pretty jovial. Like the team is really clicking as they head into this 31st consecutive Sweet 16.
Yeah, everybody seems to be really excited. A lot of focus. You could tell I posted some content. Everyone was kind of saying, Sarah seemed a little bit, like a little shy and things like that, which is expected. Everyone that kind of sees that, she's just focused. You know what I'm saying? Like she's the type of girl. She kind of like reminds me almost like of an Alex Caravan. Caravan's a little more active in the media, but just very like, hey, I go to class, I go to practice, I play basketball, I play games when I need to, and that's really all it is. And I love that about her. So she was, you could tell she was pretty just locked in, just ready to get on the bus. Paige and KK always, horsing around with each other. That's the thing I'm gonna miss. I think they bring out, the fun in each other. But yeah, everybody seemed ready to go. I asked Caroline Ducharme, hey, how we feeling? And she said she was excited. Everyone smile on their face. And I think, this team's no stranger to success, right? Like we said, 31st straight Sweet 16. So I think, they're very focused, but they're ready, and they're ready to have some fun too, I think, on their trip.
Yeah, no, I think that gets lost in all of this. It becomes such a big business that you forget that these are people that are, no disrespect to your demographic, but they're your kids. Like you're supposed to have fun. You're supposed to have fun in doing what you love, really no matter how old you are. So, and I also think like with Sarah too, like she's just shy. Like there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being shy. Like who cares? So I think that's a big part of it. And it just needs to be, she's focused, but she's also just like 18, 19 years old. Who cares? Like she doesn't need to be out there doing cartwheels. We know what the deal is. She's ready to rock. So talk to me about, you were there for the win against South Dakota State, and what was the atmosphere like?
Listen, Mark, I'll tell you what, I've been to some good games this year. I was at the men's game for Baylor. I was at the St. John's men's game, and I was at the Marquette men's game, all in Gamble. The games were loud. For some reason, I don't know what the feel was. Oftentimes, and no disrespect, but a lot of times the women's games do tend to be a little quieter, just because the demographic of fans and things like that. But this game, I mean, it was rowdy. Like when Paige just took over in that last 3 minutes. I mean, she took over the whole game, but in that last 3 minutes of the first quarter, especially when she had the buzzer beater three, it was electric. The atmosphere was great. Every seat was filled. And the one thing I loved, I know you notice it at every game. You see a decent amount of family, but it was packed. And you saw on ESPN, I'm sure most people saw it. There were so many so many, family members that came to show out. I had the chance to talk to Sarah Strong, some of Sarah Strong's family. They, like you said, they recognized me from Locked On, which I was starstruck by them, and I was glad they recognized me, and shout out to them, big listeners of the show. But just so nice and down to earth people. And the funny thing that I saw too was I think it was Azzi's mom. I think that's who it was. She was taking a picture of like their huddle in a timeout, and it's like there's going to be, hundreds of pictures out there right after the game from the Associated Press, from the Hartford Courant, but she's still like just there like a normal parent going to see their daughter play. And obviously she played at, one of the best schools in the country, but that's what it is. It's still, just their daughters playing basketball. It doesn't matter the level. And I think that's awesome. I think it's cute. I think it's amazing. It's special. It's special.
Yeah, I don't know who put it out there. I don't know if it was UConn social media or just someone on X, but I think multiple like family members, like Paige's grandparents or their dad. Then they had Azzi's brother, Aubrey Griffin's mom. It was pretty cool. And some of Sarah's family. I don't know if it was her grandparents who you met or whatnot. But yeah, shout out to them. If they're everyday listeners, they're an everydayer. I love it. I think it felt very different. And I think part of the reason why it may be quieter when the women play is not necessarily because of the age of the group, but like, they usually kill people. Like, so, like there's not as much agita. There's not as much like, oh my God, I wonder what's going to happen when, the men's, I think I read a stat that of the 20 of all the Big East games, but 18 Big East games and the men played 20. They won every one and they blew out every team. So I think the men had 15 1 or 2 possession games in conference. So that's kind of part of it. Like, I think that's the biggest issue. All right, cool. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's on to Oklahoma. The men took care of business against Oklahoma. Hopefully the women will do the same thing. They're a big favorite. We're going to talk about that and how Vegas loves this UConn women's team. And how could you not? They, had a 44-point spread, covered, 29.5-point spread, covered. So this next one is, we're going to tell you when we come back after the break.
Ever check your bank account and think, where'd all that money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you the full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just about another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you can just stop managing money and start building wealth. I started using Monarch and was shocked at how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and actually save more. Plus, no more juggling apps. Monarch keeps everything in one place. And if you manage finances with a partner, Monarch makes it easy and seamless, letting you track shared personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take the control of your finances today. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year.
All right, we're back on Locked On UConn, here with Bella Tamano of Hoops Capital of the World and my co-host on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Of course, I'm Mark Zanetto of Locked On UConn. All right, during the 31st straight Sweet 16, I mentioned before that Vegas loves this UConn women's team. They are tied for they're either second or tie. I've seen tied and just under the betting favorite to win the title with South Carolina. It's like plus 230 or plus 130, something like that. So you can actually still make plus money if you bet now on UConn winning the national championship. And it's funny that I'm opening this with like betting odds, because when we had Ben Hickman on from The Athletic, he talked about how in a lot of places it's difficult to bet on the women's and like there's an equity within that. But I've found that it's pretty easy. Like, and I don't mean that to just disrupt his article. Like, if I use FanDuel or DraftKings, FanDuel is our sponsor, so definitely use FanDuel. But if you use any of the major sites, I guess it may depend on where you live. But for the most part, I live in North Carolina. There's not too many restrictions. I know it's isn't it harder? I don't know if you know this. I don't know how much you know about the betting world, but like, isn't it difficult to vote to that's a different subject. Isn't it difficult to bet in Connecticut on UConn sports?
You cannot bet. Yeah, you can't. You just can't. Like, my dad was kind of joking. He was like, yeah, it's almost like you want to drive to the border and, place a bet on UConn to get the to cover the spread, because he felt obviously so confident. Obviously just joking around, but yeah, you can't bet on Connecticut teams in Connecticut, unfortunately.
Do you know what's so funny about that is that when I was in Connecticut when I went to the Hartford game for the men against Villanova, I was like, let me check the app and see, because in North Carolina you can't do casino like online, like you can't do games like live, blackjack or whatever, poker,
stuff like that.
but you could bet anything. But in
Oh.
Connecticut, you could do live blackjack, you could do whatever. So it's kind of weird how they pick and choose the vices that are allowed and they're not. That's just interesting to me. Anyway, but UConn is a 14.5-point favorite over Oklahoma, and it makes sense. And it's not because they're beating everybody by 1,000 points. It's because they're playing their best basketball. Like, the way that they're playing, and I know Oklahoma's better than South Dakota State. They have more size. They play in the SEC, so they definitely have played some tougher competition. But I just don't see this team keeping it close. Do you have different thoughts on that? Do you think Oklahoma is going to be more game than I believe? And I think they're going to try. I think that it's going to be a similar profile to the South Dakota State game, where it looks like it's an even matchup, and then the press, then the wearing down of Paige dominating, Sarah, Azzi, the waves of different players that UConn can bring aboard. That's where I feel like this game gets away from the Sooners.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it going pretty similarly to the way things went this past Monday. The only thing is, this is a team that scores about 85 points per game. They can put the ball in the hole, that goes for sure. The other thing is they rebound the ball well, which just scares me for UConn. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that if you dig yourself into a small hole, like you did against South Dakota, Oklahoma's it's not gonna be as easy to climb out of. And they do have some quality wins. Oklahoma beat Tennessee by 1, which UConn, obviously, we know, struggled with them a lot. They did get blown out to South Carolina, a team that UConn crushed. But again, that's just like any given Sunday, however you want to call it. Only lost to LSU by 7, but they've scored in the high 80s and even in the hundreds in some games. And again, that just scares me a little bit about UConn. Now, UConn is one of the best defensive teams in the country.
Yep.
So again, will that neutralize things? Where does that come into play? I think if you look at it and you say, okay, we talk about the three-headed monster. If Azzi plays well, if Sarah plays well, and if Paige plays well, I don't think anybody left is going to beat us. The other thing is, I know you talked about this yesterday. I saw I believe it was yesterday. KK Arnold is like, we had John Gwynn on. She's the microwave to this team, right? She is the person that ignites that spark, right? When UConn needed it most, she came in and defensively was a spitfire, and even offensively, she has her moments, and she doesn't need to score the amount that she does. But I think right now we're well-rounded enough, even with Oklahoma's, solid stats so far and solid, quality wins. I do think we pull it out. I think it could be more of like a 12, 10-point game, maybe even 8. So I don't know if I would say go with the cover. But I do think we win the game.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, and this is why. And I said Riley, it's Reagan Beers. I'm sorry, I'm notorious for screwing up names, so apologies to Reagan. I know she was considering UConn as a transfer. It would have been nice to have her. She averages 17.5 points in 9.3 rebounds. She also shoots it at a 38% clip from 3. So the one place that I could see them being hurt, and it doesn't hurt them as much because their front court can guard people who can women who can stretch the floor. So that's not going to hurt UConn, whether it's Sarah, whether it's Ice, whether it's Jana. They can all step out and guard because they're quick enough. And it's not like they're slow-footed where, they're going to get drawn out to deep water and not be able to recover. So that's the first thing. Their best player is a post player who can step out and shoot threes. She also is phenomenal at offensive rebounding. So, yes, can they not cover this game? Can they actually lose this game? Yes, but I think what keeps them apart from this Oklahoma team is what they can do from a defensive standpoint. And you've already talked about this to a little bit degree, but more importantly, when they put in Aubrey and KK for pressing, KK can turn a game around without scoring a point. And so to your point, John Gwynn was a microwave of offense for Jim Calhoun's team and the 89-90 team. But this KK Arnold led defense is essentially, she comes in and it's like time stops for the other team. She and I say that in in almost like an oxymoron way. They get sped up, and it's almost like if you put on if you put this podcast and you did it like 3 or 4 times the length, we would sound like little mice. Like that's what she makes them look like. And that's what South Dakota State, that team was really methodical. They were really trying to score and kind of create different actions that led to backdoor cuts and drag screens that led to 3-pointers. And it was all working. Everything was working. Then all of a sudden, Paige Bueckers happened and KK Arnold happened. And I don't think Oklahoma has enough firepower to kind of stop what KK Arnold and the rest. And Ashlyn Shade does it. It's not just KK. KK leads it. The entire team plays better defense when KK's on the field. It's kind of like, well, you don't want to let her down. You know what I mean? So that's what I feel with this team. And I think they keep it rolling. I don't think they're going to beat them by 30, but I'm saying that this team is a 20 to 22 point win. And I think it's comfortable because I don't think Oklahoma has anyone that can stop Sarah. I just, when I look at who they played, sometimes that doesn't matter as much, but I mean, they got beat by 41 points against South Carolina. They got handled, and South Carolina only allowed them 60 points. Now, was it on the road? Sure. But then you look at, they played South Carolina in a neutral site, albeit in South Carolina, and lost by 18 points in the SEC tournament. They have some impressive wins, like you said, a lot of points. But when they played teams that are a little more rugged, that have the opportunity to kind of shut them down, Kentucky's one of them. They won that game, but only scored 69 points. So, yeah, they take advantage of the Vanderbilts of the world. They take advantage of the Western Carolinas of the world, score 100, 122 points. But I just don't see them even coming close to this UConn team.
To your point, I got to interview Haley Timmer of South Dakota, sorry. And she said, she was like, their UConn is just a fast team, right? If we had the legs that they had, maybe things would have been different. And honestly, I don't disagree with them. It's kind of you can't teach speed. You know what I'm saying? That is gained in the off season. And a team like UConn, maybe a couple other teams in the country are as conditioned as them. And that's just pure practice. And we talked about, Dan Hurley putting people through just hell in practice. And that's what it is, right? You practice harder so that games feel easier. And I think that's obviously helped UConn thus far. So yeah, I think their speed is definitely unmatched. I do think it'll obviously play to a big advantage. I get what you're saying. I mean, hey, I'd love it if it's a comfortable game, right? But I don't know. Something inside me says it could get a little closer. And again, I don't know what that is. I just think we talked about, we thought earlier in the year Tennessee was going to be such a blowout win, and then I think SEC teams are just a little interesting. Sometimes it's just, you play in a different conference. Some wins look better than others, and some wins aren't justified enough. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's either way. I do think UConn wins regardless of the score, regardless of how large the margin is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one thing to remember is there's pre-South Carolina and there's post-South Carolina. Pre-South Carolina, UConn was not playing the type of defense they're playing now. Post-South Carolina, they are. And so we're in the post-South Carolina version of this UConn women's team, and Jana's playing better. Ice is playing better. Azzi's firing on all cylinders. She didn't against Tennessee. I just don't think there's an opportunity for Oklahoma to do enough to kind of chip away at a lead that I think UConn's going to start pretty quickly. Last thing on this. The one thing I will say that is going to be that I brought this up. I don't remember if it was yesterday. All these shows seem to kind of come together all in one fell swoop. But I did quote Rebecca Lobo and Gino Auriemma on the show talking about how for the first time, and I can't remember when, Gino has options. Like, he has options to create different lineups that make sense. So when he feels like he needs a spark, he throws in KK. When he feels like, Jana needs a break, he can throw in Ice. When he feels like the defense needs to kind of wake up, he throws in Grandma, Aubrey Griffin to kind of lead the defense and get some buckets down low. So like there are multiple options that he has. He can sit Paige for a little while to give her a rest and still feel comfortable with what Caitlin Chen gives and what Azzi does. So yeah, I mean, like I just there's just too much firepower, and Oklahoma would have to play. They'd have to play a perfect game for it to be a close game, which essentially is what we're saying if they do cover the spread.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we do. It's nice to be able to look down there, like you said, for Gino, and be able to go with multiple lineups and things like that, get some people some breaks. The other thing is, I think Gino is kind of keeping Aubrey Griffin once again in his pocket because she has not reached her fullest potential yet. She has not, and that's saying a lot because her impact when she does get subbed into the game is huge. But I think we're going to see maybe not as much as Oklahoma and maybe not as much for USC just because of the JuJu injury and things like that. But I think Aubrey, he's going to eventually, if we get to the Final Four, I think it's going to be all right, let loose. And, there is no, not that there is a restriction now, but I think now he's really saying, okay, we're going to let her go crazy and she's going to show the country, listen, if we had her all year, one, we would not have been a 2 seed. And the other thing is, I mean, I think Aubrey Griffin, again, she has not even tapped into her fullest potential yet. Obviously, only 4 games left to show that. But I think she's going to show the country a few things about herself that I'm just excited to see it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think she's going to be a big X factor. I talked about Jana being an X factor a couple shows ago, but Aubrey she's a game wrecker on defense. And so I think she provides an extra element of athleticism that they haven't had in a long time from post players. And so when you couple her with Sarah and then what Jana brings in a size perspective, it just kind of opens up a whole new door. You mentioned JuJu and her injury. So we're actually going to talk about how the bracket has really been blown wide open for UConn. And they are a major, major favorite to get to the Final Four now in Tampa. And we're going to talk about that coming up after the break. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. When it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are an MVP level type. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear and wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventure to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. Let's get Bella back in here. There she is. All right, last segment of the program. Unfortunately, I've talked about this a little bit on the last show. I was late at night watching. Actually, I got I looked at a tweet and it said, "Oh no, JuJu went down." And so I went back and looked at the video and I was like, oh man, that's an ACL. And so I started watching the game and USC, to their credit, played valiantly and really didn't lose a step in that game. But going forward, playing against a Kansas State team, if they even win this game, because I actually think Kansas State may actually win the game, it's just so tough to lose your best player. We've been through it a million times. And so I wonder what their mental state is. Like, do you look at this and say they're still going to be there and like we're going to have to beat them without JuJu, or do you feel like they may end up being upset by Kansas State in seed really only?
I don't think they're going to get upset by Kansas State. I get what you're saying. Mentally, obviously, it's a backbreaker. I mean, it is, you go from being a very, very, very possible contender to now just kind of being like, all right, like when are they going to lose is my question, is my kind of my kind of feel to things. So I definitely think it's going to be tough for them. But you said you were at home. I'll tell you where I was. I was in the locker room surrounded by Ice Brady next to me, KK Arnold, Allie Zabel. I think Ashlyn Shade was in there too. And the one thing I liked was, although they was playing on the TV and everything, although they saw JuJu down, that wasn't the focus. And I think for UConn, that's the other thing is you don't want to just, think, yes, things are a little bit more wide open. Things have been parted a little bit more, but just because they lost their best player doesn't mean that they're automatically out of things. And that's the way I look at it is sometimes you rally. Sometimes it's like, okay, you know what? Like, we got to forget about it. You got to move to the next man up mentality, which obviously, like we said, UConn's done plenty of times. But I think my biggest thing too is I never wish an injury on anybody, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think for UConn too, I wanted them to have to play a team like USC, and show that, show themselves again that they could beat them, and hopefully going into the Final Four gain some extra momentum. So I think it's obviously a tremendous loss for USC. Don't get me wrong, and I think just selfishly, I wanted to see them have to beat a gritty team like USC, and now we're not going to we might not get to see them get tested before the Final Four if they get there.
No, I agree. I think what's interesting about all of this is, so you really can't control two things in life: injuries, and really kind of like when it comes down to when you're playing a sport, like who you play, especially in a tournament setting. You're literally just going by whoever you beat and then whoever's lined up next to you, right? And so that's why it's unfortunate is like you don't have this I guess you don't have the ability to say, well, we won this tournament. If they end up winning the national championship and we beat JuJu and then we beat the UCLA team that had Lauren Betts and then we beat South Carolina. So like I think that it kind of dampers it just a little bit. I mean, I say this without like being disrespectful to USC. I don't care. Like a championship is a championship. I still think they were going to win against USC anyway. I've said that a few times already, but it is one of those things where, on these debate shows, they like talk about that. It's like, well, did they really beat the best teams? It's like, well, that's not UConn's problem. Like it just isn't. Like it sucks. It sucks for the women's game as a whole. Same way it would suck if Cooper Flagg, towards the ACL in the Sweet 16, because you want to see the best players go forward, even if it's for a hated school like Duke. Like I don't want to see that happen. So, but that's not that's not Alabama's fault on the other side. Like if they were to get there without having to play Duke, it just is what it is. All right. So what are now that we're here and you're going to be in Spokane, I think we understand. I think you just said you think USC is going to win and UConn, obviously. Who's getting to the Final Four for the rest of the teams that are left?
So for the rest of the teams that are left, I think South Carolina gets there. I think Notre Dame gets there. And I think UCLA gets there. Notre Dame, 3 seed. I believe they're facing TCU. Mm-hmm. I don't think TCU is a legit 2. I know they got Haley Van Lith. They got Sedona, who don't even get me started about her. Not a big fan of her. But I think Notre Dame gets there. I think they got no problem. And that scares me a little bit because if they somehow do get to the final and UConn does get there too, that's the one team in this bracket. I don't mind playing anybody else. I'll give us a chance against anybody else in this bracket. USC healthy, UCLA, even with Betts, she's a monster. South Carolina, even having to beat Dawn Staley twice in a season, which can be pretty tricky. I don't want to have to play Notre Dame. I just don't. I've said this plenty of times here. I don't feel like we match up well against them. I just think there's so much, even just with Hidalgo herself, I feel like there's just a weird energy that comes over us when we have to play, the Irish that I don't like. I just don't like it.
Well, two things. I don't disagree with you, but my Final Four has Notre Dame in it. I have UConn, 2 seed. I have NC State as a 2 seed. And then I have South Carolina and I have Notre Dame. Now, that being said, I don't have Notre Dame being South Carolina. I have UConn and South Carolina in the finals, and I have UConn winning it all. Not because I'm a homer, but because I think they're playing their best basketball. If they had lost to South Carolina in Columbia, I probably would have had UConn going to the Final Four and losing either in the final or the Final Four, if we're being honest. So I have extreme confidence that this UConn team can get there. But I also love some of the kind of the underdogs, right? Like I think State's playing some of their best basketball in a very difficult ACC this year. And then on top of it, I think Notre Dame is going to be, I actually think, hot take, I didn't pick this, but I did have Texas and Tennessee playing in the Sweet 16. I think Tennessee is going to beat Texas. I think they're going to knock them out, and I think that's going to pave the way for Notre Dame to get to the Final Four. And the reason why I say that is because they played them tough in the regular season. And Tennessee's the way Tennessee plays, their style, it's just weird. And watch, they'll probably lose by 50 now that I said it. But I have been pretty spot on. I'm tied for first, or I'm second in the women's bracket for all of the Locked On podcast network. So I'm doing something right. And so I think for me, that would be my only deviation from my original bracket. Is I think Tennessee's playing pretty well, and their style leads to being difficult when you have to like prepare for them last minute. So we'll see. Anything else to add before we get out of here?
I'm just excited. Like I want them to go to the distance, because wherever they go, I'm traveling to announce them. And I just hope I hope they win, and I hope it's good quality matchups, because you always want a good call when you're on the headset. So I think it's going to be fun. The only thing that kind of stinks a little bit is like, I wish, Caitlin Clark was still in the mix, and Angel Reese, because I think not to say that it's not going to be as exciting. I just like it's always gets more coverage and some more media when that happens. But I still think that the numbers are going to soar. And I'm excited. Go Huskies, man. That's all it comes down to.
Absolutely. If they do make to the Final Four, we will definitely meet, and we will definitely hang out, because I will be there too. Yes. All right. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn for Bella Tamano of Hoops Capital of the World, and my co-host on Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, and to remember, it's not about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. Go Huskies.